Good morning. Today I have the pleasure of speaking with Dr. Irwin H. Rosenberg, a distinguished university professor at Tufts University, the highest honor that this university bestows on professors, and who for many years was Dean of the Friedman School of Nutrition Science and Policy at Tufts, as well as the Director of the USDA Human Nutrition Research Center on Aging at Tufts, and who for 15-odd years before that was Chief of Gastroenterology at University of Chicago. I think it's no exaggeration to say that academia, that government, and perhaps most importantly, the public at large, both domestically and internationally, has benefited greatly from Irv's wide-ranging contributions over the years to nutrition science, to the field of medicine, and to public policy. And to examine those contributions in detail, I urge you to review the manuscript that accompanies this video. However, today what I'd like to at least initially focus on, Irv, is I'm going to ask you to discuss with us what were the initial motivations and what was the evolution in choosing the career track that you did choose. Can you give us some insight as to what the initial motivation was?
I grew up in Madison, Wisconsin, and at a time when the Midwest was not only a breadbasket of this country, but also a center of evolving nutrition science at the university, which I experienced as an undergraduate at the University of Wisconsin. My family had landed in Madison as immigrants from Russia, and sadly those that were left behind perished in the Holocaust. And I think that history gave me some sense that perhaps some of the efforts of my career ought to be directed to some aspects of humanitarian causes. So in my summer internships at the University of Wisconsin, I worked in a biochemistry laboratory that was studying the urea cycle. And I experienced an atmosphere in which the field of nutritional biochemistry was being created. Nowhere else more importantly than at the University of Wisconsin. And it was at that time that I was also considering how my education could lead me to one of the caring specialty careers such as medicine. And so that really came together with my subsequent interest in medicine and then later nutrition.
Did your parents push you towards this, or was this something that more just the university environment
My parents, who came as teenagers, were unable to benefit from the educational opportunities, but an older brother was also a student at the University of Wisconsin and its medical school, and he later became dean of the School of Medicine at Yale. And so I think there was certainly in my atmosphere some potential role models in medicine, if not in nutrition.
So let's move on beyond your undergraduate years. What was there further steps along the way as you went to medical school that encouraged this pursuit?
In medical school, I was able to continue some of my incipient interest in nutrition science by taking courses with people like Jean Mayer, who was to become the president of Tufts University and who was one of the people that later attracted me to come from the University of Chicago to Tufts to be the director of the Human Nutrition Research Center on Aging. And I might say that Mayer and some of his contemporaries, like Nevin Scrimshaw, were models of how one could use their basis in science, in nutrition science, to help to address some important problems in the world. Mayer was a leader in denouncing the way in which the Nigerian army was creating the 1969 Biafra famine. And Nevin Scrimshaw was another Wisconsin native who saw his training in medicine as an opportunity for him to reach broadly into the international world, where he became perhaps the most influential figure in international nutrition and studies of malnutrition.
Yeah, and it seems to me that you really kind of incorporated that idea of translating science to public benefit as part of your own career. So it really originated from these gentlemen in some respects.
I agree with that. And I think what I have tried to do, and perhaps tried to convey to students, both in medicine and in nutrition, that while we were becoming as expert as possible in some discipline relating to our science in medicine or nutrition, we also could achieve some balance with how that expertise could be applied to some larger problems. That isn't to say that there should be an imbalance, and that if we spend all our time thinking about how we were going to make the world better, we might not achieve success in the specific area of science whose wisdom we could bring to the policy table.
So, Irv, along the lines of what you just mentioned, I'd like you to describe how your experiences working in Bangladesh immediately, after you finished your residency, how that then got translated into a lifelong pursuit of research in folate and one-carbon metabolism. What was the experience in Bangladesh that then prompted that pursuit?
I got to Bangladesh as an NIH fellow, even before there were international fellowships at the NIH. After my internship and residency at the Mass General Hospital. And I think I came away from that 3-year experience with a number of lessons, both scientific and career-wise. The career-wise lesson I think that I learned in working in South Asia was that the institutional contributions to the application of science to humanitarian betterment were very important. And so the NIH and then later Cholera Research Laboratory became an institution for the dissemination of science about not only infectious disease, but its interaction with nutrition. And I think that influenced me later to want to develop an institutional base for nutrition at the University of Chicago in the form of its the Clinical Nutrition Research Unit and the training program which you participated in.
That's right.
And then later to, I think, organize and reorganize the USDA Human Nutrition Research Center on Aging and the Tufts School of Nutrition in programs that could share the teachings of our research to the application to human health. And an additional part of that was the fact that I think it was important to find modes of dissemination of this information. And so I have been editor of Nutrition Reviews, of the Food Nutrition Bulletin, of Nutrition and Clinical Care as means of disseminating that information. But going back to the Bangladesh story, trying to understand the remarkable phenomenon of life-threatening diarrhea in cholera, I became interested in how the gastrointestinal tract worked and how it functioned in physiology. And one of the prominent problems in South Asia at the time was a condition called tropical sprue, in which anemia was prominent. And turns out that anemia was largely related to folate deficiency and the malabsorption that was associated with the intestinal abnormalities of tropical sprue.
So you took that kind of observation in Bangladesh and then pursued it in what way when you got back?
Well, in trying to understand what was going on in cholera, back in my laboratory at the NIH, I tried to understand something of what was going on in the intestine and its interaction with the toxin that was produced by the Vibrio cholera organism. And that led me to an interest in how the physiology of the intestine was modified by this toxin. And that, by the way, led to a contribution to the eventual use of rehydration therapy in the treatment of diarrheal disease. But in pursuing the question of why people who had and problems of diarrhea and malabsorption, and how this might affect nutrient absorption, I started to zero in on how I could elucidate that problem with folate and folic acid. And that meant I had to go back to its recent history and how and what we knew about folate absorption and malabsorption, and that meant that I had to do some synthesis. And you know, in further response to your question, I remind you that this work, when I got back from Bangladesh at the Thorndike Memorial Laboratory that Harvard had at the Boston City Hospital, had an adage which said, at the bedside, you generate questions. In this case, it wasn't the bedside, it was the field in Asia. You take those questions back to your laboratory and you explore them as deeply as you're capable. But then you ought to remember to bring the answers to those questions back to the bedside. And that's how the cycle of, let's say, nutrition science or medical science comes to influence medical care or nutrition policy.
And it's that cycle that's the way it should work, really.
Hopefully.
Yeah. And I also remember you telling me at one point that, and I liked the logic of this, that you took this interest or these observations of how malabsorption was creating deficits in folate status and causing the consequences of folate deficiency. But when you went back to Boston, you said, well, first I have to understand the basic normal physiology of folate absorption before we can then explore all its anomalies that occur due to disease. And if I remember correctly, your initial studies were actually just outlining or defining the normal absorptive mechanisms. And in fact, when I started as a fellow, that's what you had me working on.
Well, I think you'll agree that the basis of understanding abnormal physiology or pathophysiology is to have a strong grounding in normal physiology.
And that's my point.
And I think it's fair to say that my laboratory in which you worked and so forth was one that was trying to most strongly make the case that an important basic science of nutrition was physiology. When nutrition science it was in its development, including in the Journal of Nutrition, the basic science which was focused upon was biochemistry.
Yeah.
And I think it's fair to say that over the course of time, not only was physiology or pathophysiology and so forth added to that scientific spectrum, but that also was added the social sciences of economics and political science.
Irv, I'd like to, for the benefit of our viewers here, ask you what suggestions might you have for young scientists who are now just entering this field of nutrition science and trying to navigate their career and flourish in that career? What experiences have you had that might benefit new scientists in this field?
Once when I was delivering an award to the then commissioner of the FDA for contributions to nutrition science, the Jean Mayer Award, I was asked by the students in the audience, how can we prepare ourselves in our career to make some contribution to better nutrition policy?
Okay.
And my answer at that time was, first and foremost, you must pursue some excellence in your own field and in your own discipline, because only then will you be able to be invited to have a place at the table of policy deliberations. And that means that you sometimes have to be very focused in your commitment to your science, even if you're trying to balance that with your own commitments to your family and even to your community. But I think that focus is terribly important, and that's one of the things that we tried to be helpful with in the way we were organizing our educational program here at the Tufts School of Nutrition.
So just to kind of reiterate what you said and to kind of emphasize what you said, it seems like in the beginning, everyone wants to have a broad impact on the world at large with whatever they pursue in their career. I think it's fair to say. But to have that ability to have a broader impact, you have to start in a very narrow, perhaps focused way, which then gives you permission or the opportunity to have a larger and broader impact.
I agree with that, although I would emphasize the word focus rather than narrow.
Okay, fair enough.
And I think that is sort of a philosophic approach to how to orient your energies as a young nutrition scientist.
Okay. So, if you could also kind of help the whole field of nutrition science navigate in the coming decade, do you have any suggestions as to what directions we ought to be emphasizing or any changes in directory for the field of nutrition science?
I would continue to emphasize the way in which nutrition science is integrated into other areas of biologic science, both in terms of scientific method and in terms of the techniques that are used in exploring the science. And that means being engaged with institutions that are having strong interdisciplinary connections. And with respect to the international application, with institutions that are broadly represented around the world.
And I guess along those same lines, how can we move ahead the field or the principles of nutrition in the health professions? I mean, you've been involved a lot over the years with trying to educate health professionals with nutrition. And yet, even after all these years of efforts, we've only made modest advances. What do we need to do to better and more effectively and more comprehensively integrate nutrition into medical care? Because particularly with the emphasis on preventive medicine, nutrition has a lot to offer.
I think you're right in saying that that's been a long-time challenge in both of our careers. And it should not be like the myth of Sisyphus and rolling a boulder up a mountain, but sometimes getting the attention and commitment of the medical profession in particular has sometimes seemed like that.
Yeah.
But I think we have to fall even more strongly upon the scientific information, the use of the best designs and studies, including epidemiology and research, clinical research design, to make the case that these nutritional considerations can be an important part of public health and the practice of medicine.